He gave his shoes to a barefoot alien girl. By dawn, her entire fleet bowed to him. HFY. Gavin Thorne had always known peace. It wasn't that he had never seen war. It was just that he had made a quiet life for himself on the edge of humanity's last colony. After the Earth had been lost, after the great wars that had ravaged the planet, there had been nowhere else to go but up. He had spent most of his life on the front lines, fighting battles he hadn't fully understood, before finally returning to the land to farm. The land had a strange way of healing you, he thought, and though his hands were rough from years of work, his soul felt lighter than it ever had. But that evening, as the sky turned to shades of orange and violet, everything in Gavin's life changed. It had been an ordinary evening. The wind was soft, and the air smelled of fresh earth. He was walking along his usual patrol route, the one that ran along the edge of the colony's border, when he noticed something strange in the distance, a bright flash of light in the sky. At first he thought it was a passing asteroid. The colonies had to deal with meteor showers from time to time, but this wasn't like that. This flash of light was too controlled, too precise. Then came the sound, a deep, rumbling roar that vibrated the ground beneath his boots. He froze. That wasn't the sound of a meteor. The crash came seconds later, a violent shake as something large and heavy collided with the earth just beyond the hill. Gavin didn't waste time thinking. He ran toward it. His instincts, trained in battle long ago, kicked in. His hand instinctively went to the sidearm he kept holstered on his belt, but he soon realized he didn't need it. Whatever had crashed, it wasn't the enemy. When he reached the site, the first thing he noticed was the shape of the wreckage. It wasn't anything he had ever seen before, not from any human technology. The craft was sleek and shining, with strange markings across its surface. The hull was smoking, but it didn't look like it had exploded. More like it had fallen hard, and the impact had left deep gouges in the soil. Gavin approached cautiously. His mind raced through the possibilities. Was it some sort of Xylan ship? The Xylan had been humanity's enemy for as long as he could remember. They had arrived with their massive fleets, their advanced technology, and their belief that humans were nothing more than a fleeting curiosity. Gavin had fought them in battle years ago, and he still carried the scars from that war. But this ship didn't feel like something from the Xylan Empire. The markings, the design, nothing about it screamed alien invasion. It was something else, something different. As he got closer, Gavin saw movement. A figure barely visible in the smoke and dust was crawling toward him. It was a girl. At first he thought she was human, but as she drew closer, he saw that she was anything but. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her hair shimmered with an iridescent blue glow. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, the pupils slitted like a cat's, but there was something softer in them, something vulnerable. She struggled to lift herself from the dirt, but the effort seemed too much for her. Gavin's first instinct was to offer help. He had seen enough injury in his life to recognize the signs of a serious wound, and it was clear that this girl was hurt. He knelt beside her, unsure what to do. She was breathing heavily and blood stained her clothes, though it didn't look like any kind of blood he had ever seen. It wasn't red. It was almost black with a strange metallic sheen to it. "Hey," Gavin said, his voice low and steady. "Are you all right? Can you hear me?" The girl blinked slowly and then, with great effort, she nodded. Her eyes focused on his face, and for a moment Gavin saw something in her gaze, a kind of recognition, as if she had seen him before, even though he knew that wasn't possible. "Water," she whispered. Her voice was weak, fragile, almost lost to the wind. Gavin didn't hesitate. He pulled a canteen from his belt and held it to her lips, carefully tilting it so she could drink. She sipped slowly, her fingers brushing against his as she took the water. There was something oddly delicate about the touch, something so human that it took him by surprise. After a moment she pulled away and looked at him with an expression of confusion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice still soft. "I'm Gavin," he replied. I live here on this planet." She blinked again, and for a brief moment Gavin thought he saw a flash of recognition, followed by disbelief. "Here?" she asked, struggling to sit up a little. You're human." Gavin nodded, though he had no idea what she was getting at. "I am, and you are." Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. She seemed to consider her words before speaking again. "I am Zara," she said, her voice filled with a strange sadness. "I'm from the Xylan Empire." The mention of the Xylan Empire made Gavin's heart skip a beat. He hadn't expected that. The Xylan were humanity's bitterest enemies, and the thought that one of them had crash-landed on his planet was almost too much to process. He had been trained to fight them, to kill them if necessary, but now here was one of them, injured, vulnerable, and in need of help. Gavin stood up, unsure how to proceed. He couldn't just leave her there. He had to help her. But how could he help someone from the Xylan Empire? These were the same beings who had decimated colonies, the same ones who had tried to wipe humanity out of existence. Yet, as he looked down at Zara, his heart told him that this wasn't just a typical enemy encounter. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't a soldier, a warrior, or a threat. She was just a girl who had been caught in something far larger than herself. He reached down and gently lifted her into his arms, cradling her with surprising tenderness. Zara flinched at first, her body stiff as if expecting him to hurt her, but then she relaxed. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "I promise." Zara didn't answer. She just closed her eyes and allowed him to carry her, her bare feet dragging in the dirt as he walked. They made their way back to his small farm, the silence between them thick with the unspoken. Gavin couldn't stop thinking about the Xylan Empire and the wars that had been fought over countless years. He had been part of that fight, and now, here he was, holding one of them in his arms. As he reached his modest home, Gavin set her down gently on the cot in the corner of his room. He had no idea what to do now. He had no idea what the future would hold. But as Zara looked up at him, her eyes filled with a strange mix of gratitude and something else, something deeper, something he couldn't quite name. Gavin knew that this encounter would change everything. In the quiet of the room, with nothing but the soft wind outside to break the silence, he took off his boots. He hadn't expected to do anything like this, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He crouched down beside her, then gently took her feet into his hands. "Here," he said, his voice soft. "You need these more than I do." Zara's eyes widened in surprise as he placed the boots next to her. Her gaze locked with his, and for the first time she smiled. A weak, fragile smile, but a smile all the same. And in that moment, everything changed. The days after Zara's arrival were strange and uncertain. Gavin found himself torn between his growing curiosity about the alien girl and the overwhelming need to protect his home. She remained in his small, modest farmhouse, recovering from her crash, though it was clear she wasn't just any ordinary visitor. She had come from the Xylan Empire, a name that still carried the weight of war, destruction, and loss. Every time Gavin thought about it, the question hung in his mind. What was she doing here? Zara's injuries healed quickly, though Gavin could tell she was still troubled. She spent most of her days resting, though every so often she would ask him about his life, questions that seemed simple enough at first, but always had an undercurrent of something more. She wanted to know about humanity, about how they lived and how they survived. In her world, humans were a distant, often ridiculed species. But the more Gavin spoke to her, the more it became clear that Zara wasn't like other Xylan. She didn't look at him with disdain or superiority, as many of her kind had. Instead, there was a kind of curiosity in her eyes, as though she were trying to understand what made humanity tick. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Gavin found Zara standing at the edge of his farm, looking out at the vast stretch of empty land. She had taken to doing this lately, standing in silence, as though trying to make sense of something too complicated for words. Her bare feet were planted firmly in the dirt, as if she had forgotten the boots he had given her. "Do you miss your home?" Gavin asked, approaching her slowly, his boots crunching in the dry grass. Zara turned toward him, her eyes distant. I don't know. I was never truly at home there," she said softly, as if unsure of what she meant. "I was born into something larger than myself. My whole life has been about fighting, about proving myself. But now it's different. I'm not sure who I am anymore." Gavin nodded. He couldn't imagine what it was like to live under such pressure, to be a part of something so vast and impersonal. He had never been a soldier. His battles had been on the land, fighting against storms, droughts, and the daily grind of survival. But even then, he could understand the pull of something bigger than yourself, something that could change your whole life. "Your people don't see us as equals, do they?" Gavin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara turned to face him fully now, her gaze steady. "No," she replied, "they never have. The Xylan Empire believes in strength. They see humans as weak, insignificant. We are a curiosity, nothing more." The words stung, even though Gavin had heard them before. The Xylan Empire had long considered humans to be a lesser species, too fragile, too divided to ever pose a real threat. But now, hearing Zara speak of it, there was something in her voice that made him wonder if she truly believed it. I think I might be different," Zara said after a long pause. She turned away from him again, her gaze lost in the horizon. "I'm not like the others. I was never meant to be part of the Empire's war machine. I never wanted to conquer. I only wanted to survive." Gavin could feel the weight of her words. There was pain in them, pain that was raw and real. He knew that feeling, wanting to survive, to find something worth living for beyond just fighting. But he didn't know what to say to comfort her. Instead, he simply stood beside her, both of them gazing out at the land that stretched on forever. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if they were both trying to find their place in a world that had suddenly changed in ways they couldn't quite understand. Over the next few days, Zara continued to recover. She grew stronger, and Gavin noticed something else, something he hadn't expected. Her curiosity about humanity seemed to deepen, and she began asking more and more questions. Not just about survival or the colony, but about the nature of human relationships, emotions, and beliefs. Do you always fight like this?" Zara asked one evening as they sat by the small fire outside his house. The stars above were bright, scattered across the night sky like diamonds. "What do you mean?" Gavin asked, raising an eyebrow. Zara tilted her head, her silver blue hair shimmering in the firelight. "I've seen you. You fight for what's yours. You fight for the land, for your people, for your freedom. You never give up, even when it seems impossible." Gavin chuckled, a quiet, bitter laugh. "We don't always fight. Sometimes we just have to keep going, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. It's not about strength, not really. It's about resilience." Zara's eyes widened as though the word was new to her. "Resilience?" "Yeah," Gavin said, nodding. "It means no matter how many times you fall, you get back up. You don't give in. Even when it seems like there's no hope left." There was a long pause. Zara stared into the fire, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds like something I could understand," she said, almost to herself. As the days passed, Gavin couldn't help but notice a subtle change in Zara. The walls she had put up seemed to be coming down, piece by piece. Her body language softened, and she started to engage more with him, asking questions, offering her thoughts, sharing stories from her past. But there were still moments of tension, moments when Zara's true nature as a member of the Xylan Empire would surface. She would sometimes slip into a defensive posture, her eyes growing distant, her voice cold. Gavin knew it was because she was caught between two worlds, the one she had come from and the one she was trying to understand now. One evening, as they sat in the small room of the house, Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Gavin, do you think the Xylan will come for me? Will they come for you?" Gavin frowned, considering her question carefully. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe. I've been part of this war too, you know, but I'm not afraid of them." Zara's gaze softened, and for a moment Gavin thought she might say something more. But instead, she just nodded and turned her gaze to the window, where the stars shone brightly above the dark landscape. The night was peaceful, but an unsettling feeling settled over Gavin as he lay in bed, unable to shake the thought that Zara's presence here was no accident. He had always known that the Xylan Empire's eyes were on humanity, but now, with Zara in his home, he felt the weight of their scrutiny more than ever. But what would happen if they found out? What if they knew Zara was here, in this remote corner of the galaxy? Would they attack? Would they see this as a betrayal? The questions hung in the air unanswered. Gavin drifted into an uneasy sleep, his mind racing with thoughts of the future, thoughts of war, of conflict, and of a girl who had fallen from the sky and changed everything. Days passed, and the weight of uncertainty grew heavier with each sunrise. Gavin's life, which had once been peaceful, now seemed to be suspended in a fragile balance. Every time he looked at Zara, he saw something more than the alien girl who had fallen from the sky. He saw the burden of her past, the war that had defined her existence, and yet, beneath it all, there was something human, something that made him believe that she wasn't just a soldier of the Xylan Empire, but a person in need of a second chance. But that second chance didn't come without a price. Every day, Zara's anxiety grew more evident. She would sit by the window at night, staring at the stars, lost in thought. There was a heaviness in her gaze, an unspoken dread that she wasn't sharing. Sometimes, when Gavin asked her what was troubling her, she would only shake her head, too tired to explain. Other times, she would talk about her homeland, her family, and the expectations that had always followed her like shadows. "I was supposed to be part of something great," she said one night, her voice trembling with a mix of regret and sorrow. "I was trained to lead, to conquer, to rule, but all I see now is destruction. The Empire doesn't care about the people it steps on. It only cares about power." Gavin listened, his heart heavy with empathy. He had seen the toll of war on people before, how it twisted them, broke them, and left them with nothing but the hollow shell of what they once were. But Zara, she wasn't broken, at least not yet. "There's always another way," Gavin said, trying to offer her a sense of hope. "You don't have to be part of that. You can choose something different." She met his gaze, and for a brief moment, Gavin thought he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. But it was gone almost as soon as it appeared, replaced by the cold reality of her position. "I don't know if I can escape it," she whispered. "The Xylan Empire doesn't let anyone go. Once you're in for life. And if I run, if they find me." Her voice trailed off, and Gavin could feel the fear that gripped her. It was a fear he understood all too well, fear of being hunted, of being caught by those you once thought you could trust. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be okay, but deep down, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. The Xylan were relentless, and their reach extended far beyond the borders of this small colony. It wasn't just about Zara anymore. It was about humanity's survival. One evening, a harsh reality set in. Gavin had just finished his evening chores when he heard the distant hum of engines overhead. His heart skipped a beat, and he instinctively glanced up at the sky. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow across the land, but the sound of the engines grew louder, closer. A familiar, chilling sensation crept over him. He quickly ran to Zara, who was standing by the window again, staring at the sky. Her expression had changed, hardened, tense. She already knew what the sound meant. "They're here," she said quietly, her voice almost lost to the wind. Gavin's blood ran cold. He didn't need to ask who they were. The Xylan Empire had arrived. Zara turned to face him, her eyes filled with both regret and determination. "You have to leave," she said. "You can't stay here if they find you." "I'm not leaving you," Gavin cut her off, his voice firm. "I won't run. This is my home, and I'm not just going to abandon it." Zara hesitated, her gaze shifting from him to the horizon where the sound of engines was now unmistakably loud, the shape of ships beginning to appear against the darkening sky. "I never wanted this for you," she said softly, "but you don't understand. They won't stop until they have me, and when they do, they'll destroy everything in their path to get to me." Gavin grabbed her shoulders gently, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't care who they are. I won't let them take you." His voice was steady, but there was a fire in his chest, a fire that had been lit the moment he decided to help her, the moment he saw her not as an enemy, but as someone in need of compassion. There was a long pause, a silence that stretched between them as the ships drew closer. Zara was looking at him now, her expression a mixture of disbelief and something else, something almost like admiration. "You're willing to risk everything for me?" she asked, her voice shaky. "For you," Gavin said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "And for what you represent. You're not just an alien. You're someone who can change the course of this war. You don't have to go back. You can choose." Zara's eyes softened, her lips trembling slightly as if she were fighting to hold back tears. "I've never been given a choice before," she whispered. Before Gavin could respond, a loud explosion shook the ground beneath them. The sky lit up briefly as a massive explosion tore through the air. The ships had begun their assault. The colony was under attack. "We have to move," Gavin said urgently, pulling her toward the door. "Now." Together they ran out into the fields, the distant sounds of gunfire and explosions ringing in their ears. Gavin's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept moving, pulling Zara along with him. The colony was already in chaos. People were scrambling to take shelter, and the Xylan forces were descending upon them like a storm. But as they reached the edge of the colony, Gavin heard the unmistakable hum of more ships coming in from a different direction. Back up, he realized with a sudden rush of adrenaline. More ships, more soldiers, and they were here to help. Zara stopped, her face pale as she looked toward the incoming fleet. "That's not possible," she whispered. "There's no way they could have arrived so quickly." "Who is it?" Gavin asked, his mind racing. "I don't know," Zara replied, her voice barely audible. "But if they're here, it means they're not with the Empire." Gavin's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could there be others, people who were willing to help them? People who believed there was more to humanity than just war. As the ships descended, the truth became clear. The fleet that had arrived was Xylan. It wasn't even human. It was a ragtag group of mercenaries, rebels, and defectors, fighters from across the galaxy who had grown tired of the endless conflict and who believed in the possibility of peace. They had come to protect Gavin and Zara, and just like that, the battle shifted. The Xylan forces had underestimated the power of unity, of alliances forged in the unlikeliest of places. The tide was turning, and Gavin could feel it in his bones. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about standing together and fighting for something bigger than any one individual. As the first blast of energy fired from the rebel fleet, Zara's gaze met Gavin's once more. This time, there was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, unwavering certainty. "I choose this," she said, her voice steady and strong. And in that moment, Gavin knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The battle raged on into the night, and the sky above Gavin's colony became a battleground. The Xylan ships, sleek and menacing, clashed with the rebel fleet, their energy weapons lighting up the dark sky like falling stars. Gavin could feel the ground shake beneath his boots as explosions echoed from every direction. It was a fight for survival, but it was also more than that. It was the beginning of something new. Zara stood beside him, her face illuminated by the distant flashes of gunfire. She was no longer the same alien girl who had stumbled into his life days ago. Her posture was strong, her eyes filled with determination. She had chosen her side and she wasn't going to back down. "This is it," Gavin said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We fight together. We show them what we can do." Zara nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for our future. Together, they ran toward the front lines, where the rebels were already engaging the Xylan forces. The sounds of laser fire and explosions filled the air, creating a symphony of violence. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, there was something else, something that didn't belong. The human spirit. It was resilient, relentless, and defiant, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Gavin grabbed his weapon from the ground and joined the fray, firing into the advancing Xylan troops. The rebels, a mix of humans and other species who had defected from the Empire, fought with a fury that matched his own. They had heard the call for change, the call to break free from the chains of war, and they were answering it with everything they had. Zara moved with a grace and precision that surprised Gavin. Despite her background as a member of the Xylan Empire, she was no stranger to combat. She fought like someone who had been trained for this her entire life, her movements fluid and deadly as she took down Xylan soldiers with ruthless efficiency. But it wasn't just her training that made her formidable. It was her heart, her desire to protect, to change the future for the better. As they fought side by side, Gavin couldn't help but notice how different Zara was from the Xylan soldiers he had faced in the past. They had been cold, calculating, and devoid of emotion. But Zara, she was fighting for something more. She wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to build something new. Hours passed, the fight growing more intense with every passing minute. The Xylan forces had underestimated the rebels, thinking they would be easy to crush. But they had made a fatal mistake. The rebels, led by Zara's quiet determination, had united in a way the Empire never expected. And that unity had proven to be more powerful than the most advanced weapons. Gavin fought beside Zara, his heart racing as he dodged blaster fire and returned fire in kind. Each time he pulled the trigger, he could feel the weight of the fight, the weight of everything they were fighting for. This wasn't just a battle for the colony, for survival. It was a battle for freedom, for peace, for the chance to live without fear. The hours stretched on, but with every passing moment, the Xylan forces began to retreat. The rebels' unrelenting assault had taken its toll, and the Empire's grip on the colony was slipping. Gavin could see it in the faces of the soldiers, their confidence faltering as they realized they were losing. Then, it happened. A loud explosion tore through the air, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. A massive Xylan ship, the flagship of the Empire's fleet, exploded in a blaze of light, its remains scattering across the sky. The rebel fleet had made their move, and they had struck the heart of the Xylan Empire's power. The Xylan forces, now in disarray, began to retreat, their once formidable lines collapsing as the rebels pressed their advantage. Gavin looked to Zara, his breath coming in heavy gasps. She was standing tall, her eyes scanning the battlefield, her expression unreadable. "It's over," Gavin said, his voice filled with awe. "We did it." Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze to the sky, watching the remnants of the Xylan fleet vanish into the distance. For a moment there was silence, a silence that spoke volumes. The war was not over, but a new chapter had begun. The rebels had won, but the real victory was the hope they had kindled in the hearts of everyone who had fought. This wasn't just a victory on the battlefield. It was a victory for humanity, for peace, for the future. As the smoke began to clear and the last of the Xylan forces withdrew, Gavin walked over to Zara. She was standing by herself, her posture relaxed, but there was something in her eyes, something that spoke of relief, of exhaustion, and of a future that was finally within reach. "You did it," Gavin said softly, approaching her. "You gave them a reason to fight." Zara looked at him, her expression softening. "We gave them a reason," she corrected. "It wasn't just me, it was everyone who believed in this." Gavin smiled. "You were the spark," he said. The rest followed. She shook her head, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Maybe, But it was your strength, your belief that gave me the courage to do this. I never thought it was possible. I never thought that humans could fight back, could change the course of things. But your people showed me that anything is possible. Gavin stepped closer, his hand reaching out to rest on her shoulder. We're not done yet, he said. But together we'll make sure humanity's voice is heard. The two of them stood there, watching as the smoke cleared and the first signs of peace began to emerge from the chaos. The colony was safe for now, but this was only the beginning. There was still much work to be done, still so much to rebuild. The war had taken its toll, but in the aftermath, something beautiful was starting to grow. A future where humanity could stand tall, side by side with those who believed in peace. And in that future, Zara would be a symbol of the change that was possible, a living reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope.